It is 1700. We are live with Radio Free Transarctica, and I am here with Mr. Gregory Baldi. And sir, would you like to tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure.
While I go and turn off the thermostat.
Do you want me to wait for you?
No, go ahead.
Okay, well, hello. I'm Gregory Baldi. Visual effects artist, motion graphic designer, mystic, and just all-around good guy, I suppose.
Well, this gentleman has been on the periphery of my life for a while, and I feel like we've been on the periphery of each other's lives for a while, where we have some common friends and some, but also we just have parallel paths, or very, very common parallel paths, and a lot of common things that we're working on, and we've been talking about everything in the world, basically, already
It's
today.
too bad we didn't cover that when I first got here, because our conversation before this started was absolutely nonstop. I mean, we covered so many topics. So what are we going to talk about?
Well, the recent topics on Radio Free Transarctica, the first topic was, what even is the world?
Ooh, that's a great question. Are you asking me?
Yeah. What is your take on what is the world?
Oh, I can't even imagine what it is. I mean, I was taught.
I got to crack open a beer for this one.
Oh man, I feel like I'm under the spotlight with this question. You know, my best answer is I don't know. You know,
that's a good answer.
What we've been led to believe, I feel like, is only a half truth. Mm-hmm. You know, it almost as if it was a good starting point, but maybe there's more to it. I think I definitely, from my perspective and my experience, I've come to this realization that it is alive and it works with us, and we work with it, whether we know it or not.
Mm-hmm. I think that that's a very accurate way to think about it, in fact, because the fact is, in my perception, that the universe is definitely a living organism.
Absolutely.
It's not a mechanical dead thing that we initially imagine it to be. And in fact, I love to look at tarot cards. And the tarot cards, the major arcana kind of represents an arc of a child growing. It's the arc of a lifetime. And death is actually at the very middle, not at the end.
Yeah.
At the end is the world.
Isn't that the whole crucifixion, dying on the cross?
Right.
When you take the right path.
Yeah. So the hanged man is the crucified man.
Oh, okay.
I have a lecture on the tarot card meanings, but the tarot cards are actually a very interesting topic, because the Knights Templar, my tradition of the tarot cards, I was taught from the ancient mystical order Rosicrucians. Mm-hmm. So the Rosicrucian order, they taught me that the Knights Templar found the tarot cards in the Temple Mount at Jerusalem. And buried beneath the Temple Mount, there were many artifacts. For example, they had remnants of the Holy Cross, and they had the Ark of the Covenant was perhaps there, or there's people disagree on what was there and what wasn't there, because people talk about, was the Holy Grail there? Was it not there?
Sure.
Was it somewhere else? But what we know for sure is that they found a book, and that book, if you read it from if you read it in the way that Hebrew is read, tarot is actually Torah. And Torah is the Aramaic pronunciation of Torah.
Mm-hmm.
They had a final T sound, and that actually exists in modern day Arabic, where if you read the Quran, in the Quran, when they refer to the Torah, they'll refer to Torat. So the tarot, the Knights Templar who were excavating the Temple Mount were French, and so the final T, tarot, they dropped, and they read left to right. But they believed that they would be persecuted by the Pope, or not by the Pope, specifically the Pope, but by the Church in general, for kind of taking these mystical teachings that they found underneath the Temple Mount. They thought that they would be persecuted as heretics, and eventually they were burnt at the stake. Many of them were killed. But they disguised the tarot cards, or they disguised the book of the Torah, of that Torah that they found there, which is a different Torah than the Torah that we have today, as the Bible, as the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible.
Why did they have to go through all this trouble to hide something?
Well, because in early Christianity, this is actually an interesting thing. Early Christianity was the Christianity of Jesus was a rebellion, almost. It was a rebellion of the people, and it was put down by the Romans and by the Hellenized Jews, who were the Pharisees, and they put down that uprising by crucifying the leader, which was Jesus. Whether people agree about there being a resurrection or not, or the nature of that resurrection, the basic nature of it is that that's the political thing that happened. And what then happened afterward is that throughout the Roman Empire, the Christianity spread like wildfire. I mean, it spread so fast that by the time of the Great Fire of Rome, which was, I believe, in AD 64, in the time of the Emperor Nero, the burning of the city of Rome, that's only 31 years past 33 AD, when supposedly Jesus Christ was crucified.
That makes sense.
So in 30 years' time, they had spread not only so far that they had gone from Jerusalem all the way to Rome, but they were so powerful in Rome that the emperor blamed them for causing the Great Fire. So they were scapegoated for the Great Fire, so they must have been a large enough or threatening enough organization in those 30 years to have been scapegoated.
And so how does all this fall back onto the tarot card?
Well, the tarot cards...
And what do you love most about it? Like, how come you were drawn to it?
The tarot cards... The Torah is the blueprint of the universe. The Torah is the blueprint that God made in heaven of the universe. And we don't actually have the Torah. No, there's no physical copies of the Torah.
Is this like in the etheric realm? Kind of like the Akashic records?
It's a...
you can't access it here?
Yeah, it's a hyper-dimensional reality.
Okay.
The hyper-dimensional reality of the Torah is that the true Torah exists as something that exists in heaven, it's said.
Sure.
And we only have basically a cross section of it.
Have you seen it?
I've experienced it in certain ways personally.
Okay. How's that?
Amazing. It's always amazing. And you've experienced it in certain ways personally too.
Maybe.
Everyone has. They may not know it, because these are the laws that are basically the Torah. The Torah is the law.
Mm-hmm.
that means the natural laws, the laws that underlie reality.
Well, it's funny about those natural laws. We don't, I guess today in this society, I mean, they're coming into light more, but not a lot of us have an understanding of it. Like maybe we once knew a little bit about it and we think of nature, natural law. But I think it stems back to like the Book of Thoth, right?
Yes.
Or the Hermetic Principles kind of touches upon it in a different light. But those are really like, it's the law. You can't change the law.
Exactly.
But you can like work with it, and miraculous things could happen. Like I know for me, I've touched upon it and it made sense. Like there was no doubt in my mind. My gut told me right away, this is like real. This is how the universe can flow. It made sense to me. I don't know for you what it did for you.
Well, I think that what I realized was kind of the fractal nature of reality, which is to say that when you look at, for example, a Mandelbrot set or some kind of mathematical set of fractals, they're self-similar, but they're always different. Meaning that any number that you plug into them is going to have a similar structure to any other number, but it will also...
like counterbalance, kind of.
It will also be a little bit different. And my understanding of reality is such that the true elegance of reality relies on the irrational numbers, which is pi, phi, the golden ratio, the Fibonacci sequence.
Which isn't exactly taught to us.
It isn't taught to us, but it's naturally occurring
everywhere. I mean, you can't get away from that number. Once you discover
you can't. I mean, we can. There's trees outside the window here, and it's like you can't get away from it. Looking at the leaves or the branchings of the branches of trees.
I know. For me, like in cinematography, we always use the golden ratio when we set up the frame. Yeah. Same thing with doing graphics and stuff. But it pertains in so many different ways, and it's actually kind of funny because when you look at certain products that are on the market, they were built to those same ratios. Almost everything that has gone big has that built into it, as if the designer fundamentally knew that it was inherent in his design. Yes,
and I think that goes back to Plato's idea of the Platonic ideal. Or of the ideal creation. That, for example, if we take a chair, what is the definition of a chair? A chair is something that you sit on, but what would the ideal chair look like?
Right.
Is the ideal chair a simple, elegant thing that's sat on, or is it like a couch with cup holders and you can lean back and...
Well, the answer is simple. Which one speaks to every person? It's all about perspective.
That's essentially that's the core of the truth that we're getting at, is that there is an objective reality, which is the overlapping of all people's agreed conjecture.
It's almost like common belief.
The common belief, right, exactly. It's the common statement
so if we lived in a manifested reality and everybody was under the same idea as this is how it is and it can't be any other way, how do we challenge that? Like, how do most people break that kind of like normal trend? Because the way that we see our life, our existence, is essentially creates our existence.
Right.
One without the other, we wouldn't have this place. I suppose. So if the general populace doesn't know that we are creating our own reality, then they don't know that we can shift it collectively if we all come together on an idea like global meditation, for positive, and you'll see like crime rates will go down.
Well, that is the nature of, let's say, I would call them sociopaths, but they're controllers. The people who are looking to control others.
Sure.
There's a certain breed. actually, Joseph de Maistre, a French politician and philosopher, said that of every species, there is a certain number of that animal that is appointed to devour the rest.
So is that kind of this notion of if you're going to do bad, you better do it well?
Yeah.
Because you're on that team?
It's kind of like that. Because
I can see that.
Because basically their goal is, how much can I amplify my ability to affect reality? And so they think, I can amplify my ability to affect reality by making other people's realities flow along with mine. And if I can keep them asleep, I have all the power of their mass, or their consciousness mass. You could think there's it's like almost a massive consciousness, or a raft of
I've put some thought into this before. You know how we kind of get these ideas that this organization is, negative, bad, whatever you want to say. But that might just be kind of like the cover story to essentially gain those types of energies, that power, from the fear that is generated from the being scared of something. Almost like a spell, right?
Right.
I mean, it's possible. I don't know.
And when you're thinking about a spell, that's so interesting to me, because when you go back to Kabbalah, what that is talking about is that the universe was created through language. And when we're talking about a spell, a magical spell, you're spelling something.
Yeah, casting a sentence, casting a spell.
Casting a spell.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You're spelling it out.
Well, even with a simple conversation, you're exchanging words. Words in the mirror is swords. You're having a sword fight. So
the throat chakra and the vibrations that come out of it, this is the tool that human beings have to translate the thought energy into the physical vibratory energy. This is essentially, that means that the voice is the interface between the spirit and the physical reality.
Yeah.
And in that case, the Hebrew makes a lot more sense, because in the Hebrew, the word for spirit is ruach. And ruach doesn't mean, ruach. It doesn't necessarily mean spirit. It means that, but it also means breath. It means both simultaneously.
It's one of my favorite things to do, breath work.
Yes. Yeah, breath work is amazing.
I'm sure you get a lot from singing.
Yes, and singing is amazing for it. Also, playing flute is amazing for breath work.
Is it the flute or the recorder? Because when I was growing up, I had to pick an instrument for class.
Oh, well, I've never found a recorder that didn't sound like shit.
Okay, that's probably why it was free.
There's plenty of flutes. I don't know. I have this flute here.
Whoa. Where did you get that?
This was a gift from me. Someone from the Washoe tribe here in Nevada. We're here in Reno, Nevada. And I just tied it to my case earlier because I was playing down by the river. Down by the lake.
Do you do that often?
Every day.
So cool.
I do it because I go to play for the ducks and the geese and the
Yeah.
But this is actually, you can almost think of it as a training tool for breath work.
Sure.
And when
because it's a wind instrument, right?
Right. So. And actually, I studied ayahuasca shamanism for a long time. I studied over the past 10 years. So from basically the ages 20 to 30. I'm 30 now. I studied heavily a lot of psychedelics, but ayahuasca was my primary interest.
Do you think that ayahuasca is like a teacher?
Yes, absolutely. The The ayahuasca vine, the Banisteriopsis capi vine, to be more specific. That's the scientific name of the ayahuasca vine.
And that's kind of like when they combine the root with the leaf to
so the
tea.
The vine itself, that would be enough. But that has no dimethyltryptamine, or a very, very small amount that's naturally occurring in the plant.
Sure.
Dimethyltryptamine tends to focus in things that are leafy rather than woody. The vine is a woody vine, and then you combine it with the leaf of the Psychotria viridis tree, or a number of other trees. You could do the Diplopterus craporana tree, which is called chacruna by the that's called chalipanga by the people in the Amazon, and chacruna is the Psychotria viridis tree. And then there's also Mimosa tenuiflora, which is called Mimosa hostilis in
So a mimosa, not as in like the champagne and orange.
No, no.
This is a different type of mimosa.
A different kind of mimosa, but in the ayahuasca ceremonies, the shaman plays a flute or sings throat singing in a way that is called Icaros.
Alaska, don't they do that?
Yeah, and the.
Yeah.
So you do it. The point of it is to get an overtone. So like, hey, you hear that high tone that's moving up and down.
Yeah, it resonates up above my head.
It's
strange.
It's that tone. Ayahuasca taught me how to do that, and I studied it with ayahuasca. And ayahuasca is a goddess. My cat, who my sister's taking care of right now, but her name is Aya.
Aya.
And her name is Aya because I named her after the ayahuasca goddess.
Aya was so inspired.
Yeah. But the flutes are also. This is like a training thing for the breath work because. And the Native Americans used it. The Native Americans in North America, I should say, used it in much the same way that the Native Americans in South America used it.
Much respect.
Which is to guide spiritual journeys.
Yeah.
And because you can feel the vibrations of this in your soul. It's a very. This is made from a broom handle.
Are you kidding?
This is a broom handle.
That's all it takes, huh?
Yeah.
To get a beautiful instrument like that.
It was made by a man from the Washoe tribe here in Reno, Nevada, and
I once saw a guy on YouTube make a flute out of a carrot.
Out of a carrot.
Out of a carrot. You can Google that right now, and you'll probably find it in 2 seconds. But
there's
a whole tutorial on it too.
People used to make them out of just reeds that were on this. So in Egypt, it was very common to have reeds on the side of the Nile.
Yeah.
And so people would take the reeds and they would make reed flutes out of them.
Are reeds almost like bamboo?
Yeah, they're similar. They're similar, but they're a little softer on that. They're a little softer, more flexible.
Because they're on the river, they're probably all wet.
Yeah. Well, they're very damp.
Have you been to Egypt?
I have not been to Egypt, but that is one of my top.
Me too.
It's Egypt. Egypt and Japan are pretty much neck and neck.
I stopped in Japan. I didn't get to explore. We had a trip planned, but it was interrupted, so we ended up going to Thailand and did that whole part of the continent. But
did you get to do any meditative experiences in Thailand?
Not while I was there. I was exposed to it. I went to plenty of temples. The experience was purely a vacation at the time.
Would you like one?
A Pabst Blue Ribbon?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm having trouble talking because my lips are so chapped.
Oh.
Thank you, man. Cheers. But since I've been to Thailand, it had a profound effect on me. in the sense of just a better understanding of cross-culture and how the love can be shared without words being exchanged. And that also goes to show that, this whole idea of, opposing, I guess, countries and looking at them like, oh, they are this, they're that. I feel like we should be kind of like changing that into this idea of they're our brother, they're our sister,
Right.
More like that type of vibe.
I definitely feel, there's been a rise in nationalism lately.
What is nationalism?
Nationalism is the political theory that a nation of people is a specific group that has a ethnic, cultural, historical, shared traditional background of some kind that forms a nationality.
Sure.
And that every individual nationality has the right, ideally, to rule itself.
Oh, okay. So from what I understand, so like a nation is the max amount of people that you can govern, right?
Yeah.
So, and each nation has maybe a different type of government set up and a different type of society set up. And it's almost like this whole concept of Atlantis, as if it broke out into all these different areas. And they created a society that would specialize in this type of work, in this type of work, in this type of work. And then maybe one day, this realization that, wait a minute, we're all working together.
Right.
We're not so different. We're just, we're different, but we're not different.
Yeah. I feel like the 12 tribes of Israel are basically a story that's kind of about that. I think my personal point of view on the Bible is that the Bible is a lot less literal than people would like to think it is, but it is also a lot more literal than people would like to think it is.
Aren't there like layers? So you have like
there's many layers.
You
Yeah.
have because that's one thing. Like in Catholicism, the mentality for most, I'll give you an example from experience. Like my wife's family thinks that it's very literal. You cannot change any of it. This is what it is. And then there's this other understanding of, well, maybe there's like a metaphor to it, or maybe this is how more like an allegoric kind of teaching. Or so for me personally, like when I started to look at the different layers, I had a deeper understanding. And now I realize that, there's truth in the linear, there's truth in this layer, but the allegoric translation for me, when I really started to pick up like kind of like the mystical occult like teachings, that's when it all clicked.
That's exactly how it was for me too. When I first started to realize that that the zodiac was encoded in the Bible.
Oh, absolutely.
Then that was when I first realized like the Bible is 100% true. Not 100% true in the sense of the literal words of it are 100% true, but that
it was truth for you is what you found.
Yeah, it reflected. This is why I say that the Torah, the Bible that we have, the physical document that we have that we could hold in our hands, is not the true Bible. That is a metaphysical document, a metaphysical word of God that it is infinite and always expanding. God is always speaking things into existence. But when we have this little cross section, this was what came out of the heart. So I feel like there's this metaphysical document, and it is focused through the lens of the heart of a person who is called a prophet or a messenger or something like that.
And that's where maybe some of the confusion comes in, is when we try to use our minds to interpolate something rather than our heart.
Right.
Even when you sing, I'm sure that when it comes from the heart, it's different.
Yeah.
And the same thing goes maybe when we're reading it too. If we're reading from the mind,
people can tell the difference between someone who's singing up here and someone who's singing here.
I see that on a lot of those shows, where they make a big deal out of winning and
American Idol or whatever. Yeah,
I see that a lot. But I know, I forget who quoted this, but it was, the mind makes a great servant for the heart, but it doesn't make a good master. Yeah.
I was just teaching this, so I just did the Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall, chapter 13, yesterday.
I have a story about him I'll have to tell you after this.
Okay. Chapter 13 was the story of Hiram Abiff.
I'm not familiar.
Hiram Abiff that's the central myth of Freemasonry.
Oh, okay.
And I highly recommend you go watch that video.
What is it? What is it called?
Hiram Abiff.
Hiram?
But some people say Abiff.
Abiff? Does that have anything like Baphomet? Abiff?
No, he was the architect of Solomon's temple.
Oh.
And he was murdered, supposedly.
Solomon, like S-O-L.
Yeah,
Son.
Yes.
Mon. Yeah. Whatever. I forget how it breaks down.
Yeah.
It's coded. If you break up the syllables, you can get to the root.
Sun and moon and that are joined by Om. And actually Hiram Abiff.
That makes sense.
Hiram, the word Hiram, the letter Chet or Chet is the first letter, and then Resh, and then
is that Egyptian?
No, this is Hebrew.
This is Hebrew. Okay.
Yeah, Hiram, and then Mem. The Chet means is for Chashash, which is the sun, and Resh is for Ruach, which means the spirit or the breath.
Mm-hmm. Kind of like the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Okay. Is the in between?
And then Mem
connects them, or
and then Mem is the water force or the feminine force. Okay. So we have both names, Solomon and Hiram Abiff, is the fire force, the mediating spiritual force, and the water force or the feminine force. So you have the masculine and the feminine that are mediated by a spiritual force. And that's the Trinity. Right. That's the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost.
Yeah.
And that theological thing has been repeated in many different ways.
Sure. Because
people are looking at the same thing, but they're just looking at it from different angles. Mm-hmm. And so
it reminds me of Plato's story with the blind man and the elephant.
Right.
Everybody's touching the elephant, they're all blind. This man's touching the tail and he thinks it's a rope. This guy's grabbing his leg and he thinks it's a tree stump. And yet they don't know what it is. But they have an idea from their own perspective.
Yes.
And they're not quite there. But if they all come together, they might figure it out.
Yes. That's pretty much exactly it. And that's why Plato had a lot of shit right. Plato said that all knowledge was just unforgetting. That we already have all knowledge.
Yeah.
Because we essentially we're from God. God created us and he compartmentalized us. Basically, he decided to separate us out of himself.
Mm-hmm. Almost like breaking up into a million pieces and then everybody gets like a little divine spark.
Right.
And that spark, what do you think happens? Because I know earlier we talked about this idea of like there are people out there who have a soul, who have life force. Like it's coming through them and you can see in their eyes. But then there are other people who... background people, maybe.
I feel like
they just
there. It's just a matter of how brightly the flame burns.
Do you think it burns out?
I don't really think so because
energy cannot be created nor destroyed, right?
Yeah, it can't really.
What about repurposed?
It can be repurposed, but so what I often find is that people who seem faded, they have their energy, they spread their energy out. And people who seem bright concentrate their energy. Mm-hmm. So like Tai Chi, in Tai Chi, we try to concentrate our energy into Dantian, into the great ocean of the belly, or we try to then compress it into Jing in the bones, and like it's a matter of like trying to bring in energy,
like from the ether or like from around you.
Yeah, I mean it's just instead of the idea is these Taoists were trying to pursue immortality. Mm-hmm. And the way that they thought about immortality was about entropy. Essentially, that entropy is the cost or the loss of energy over time to friction and to just basic wear and tear of the universe.
Sure.
And
were they after immortality physically?
Well,
because that's
an interesting question of itself.
A lot of people, I mean, that's kind of like when I was growing up, like there was these stories of Egypt and how they were always mummified to, for the afterlife. So I always knew that there was more to this than just the physical. And plus, as later on goes too, I was aware that all matter comes from energy. So there's energy that makes matter, at least in kind of like a linear way of thinking. So this notion of like an afterlife is absolutely, I mean, why not?
To me it makes perfect sense, because if you look at the laws of thermodynamics, like we were just talking about, is matter is neither created nor destroyed. Energy is neither created nor destroyed. It all nets out in the end the same. And so to me, what happens is that the human body, we go through this cycle, we build up this body that is working together, it's all working in its various parts, and at some point it ceases to function as a whole in that context. But almost half of the cells in your body are not human cells. They are microbes or bacteria of various kinds.
Are you talking about the gut biome?
Well, the gut biome and the skin biome.
Oh, right, yeah.
There's all kinds of biomes of microbial life in the human body.
Sure.
So almost half of the cellular mass of a human body is actually not human cells, but is these other kinds of cells that are microbes, bacteria,
it's like a
viruses.
Big old farm.
Right. And so when the human cells stop working together, the farm doesn't just die. The farm actually doesn't die. The other half blooms. Mm-hmm. So this half...
Is this more like almost like mycelium? How it will grow in the soil and it'll fruit when it's ready.
This is mushrooms are a great teacher.
They are.
Mushrooms are a great teacher.
I've actually found my most, I guess, almost as if it course corrected my mindset for me. Like I was 23 when I had my first mushroom experience, and we went out camping and we went and had a salad with this giant, just, I don't know, it was probably 10 grams each. It was a lot. It was my first time.
Yeah.
So, and that night the stars were all connecting and forming like letters, like ancient text. It's like almost like cuneiform. That's what it looked like to me now that I'm, in retrospect.
That's amazing.
But I'm not sure what it read. I don't know what it said.
Right.
And then of course there was almost like this restructuring of my brain, like in the way that I thought. Because at the time, like I was struggling because I smoked cigarettes when I was a teenager. And that night I struggled through it on mushrooms. This whole idea, I did like I saw my body on the inside and I felt everything, every organ, and it focused me on my lungs and it showed me the damage. And that night I threw a pack in the fire and I was quit forever and never looked back.
Right on, man. Right on.
So that's a great teacher.
I've had similar powerful experiences with various teachers. I mean, mushrooms are a great teacher. Mescaline containing cacti are a great teacher, like San Pedro, peyote.
Is that more around the heart? The mescaline?
It is very much so. It's almost like,
I mean, mushrooms are too. My heart always opens up.
Yeah. Well, mushrooms are interesting because mushrooms are almost so mushrooms are like if you think about, this is how I think about life. Life is like a sine wave. So the sine wave has a part that's positive, and then it has a part that's negative. The mushroom is the negative part. That's the death aspect.
Like the mother energy, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's you could say it's the yin energy, but it's so mushrooms are very yin, and
I felt like it was
mescaline cacti are very yang.
Oh, okay. So I've only experienced the yin. I haven't experienced the other. And that's kind of what I was wondering about the DMT, because it seems from the videos I've caught, they always mention that it's a teacher as well, just like the mushroom, but it's more of a fatherly figure.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure. I've never taken it.
I feel like dimethyltryptamine on its own is masculine, but it's a bright light. It's a very bright light. And it's like you illuminated your mind. It's like you illuminated the cave of your mind. So when we talk about like Plato talked about the
going
cave.
Into the cave, yeah.
Yeah, and seeing just shadows on the wall.
That is definitely when we close our eyes.
Right.
Absolutely. Because I've had some pretty tremendous experience myself just by meditating, where things happen that I can't explain.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. The things can happen that are seemingly nonsensical or
I've projected myself, across the country to my grandmother's house to check on her.
Yeah.
I've created I've been able to really get good at vision, like creating a vision and seeing it and playing it out as if it was real.
Wow.
Almost as if we were dreaming. I've been playing around with this idea of consciously sleeping. I don't know if you've ever explored that.
Yeah, I have because it's a Tibetan Buddhist practice.
Is it?
Yes, it's called. They call it the yoga of dreams or the yoga of sleep. Okay. And
is that like practicing for death?
Yes, basically. Okay. Basically, the idea is that death is a heavy sleep.
Yeah,
is a heavier kind of sleep, and that if you want to be awake when you die, then you want to be awake when you're asleep.
Can't the I know that over in India, I was watching, Sadhguru. I was watching an interview with him, and he talked about his wife making an announcement that she's going to leave, and she was able to leave her body at will when the time was ready. And this isn't like a one-off thing. This is
not a unique thing at all.
Many beings know this and are able to do it willingly. How do you think that even works?
I've gone to the threshold. I've gone all the way to the point where I could have left, and I had the choice, and I chose to come back. I've done it multiple times, but so. You can sit. You sit and you meditate so deeply, you can even stop your own heart. And you can stop your own heart for a long time, actually.
Yeah.
And still be conscious. But the thing is that at a certain point, it's like you have stuff that you came here to do.
It's almost like a soul contract, right?
Yeah, basically you have,
or a karmatic debt, sort of.
By incarnating at all, you have incurred a debt.
Sure, absolutely.
Our whole system of finance is a debt-based system of finance, because basically what happens is that when your father and mother give birth to you, you owe a debt to them and to all the ancestors, and you owe debts in order to have incarnated into this lineage, so that you can do certain things, so that you can progress through certain pathways, and so that you can conquer certain types of energies. You can encounter
that makes sense
certain experiences.
For me, I've run into if I run into the same kind of occurrence over and over again, I quickly pick up on it that why is this happening again? And I reflect on it and I figure out a way how to course correct it if it comes up again. Or as of recently, I've been getting like downloads, literally, just as if there was a higher realm just sending me lessons to learn, and if I don't learn, then they keep happening again, and if I do learn, then I'm gifted with something in my world.
Do you like the science fiction writer Philip K. Dick?
I don't know him. I apologize. I'm sorry. I do not know him.
You would love him so much. Well, he wrote Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which became Blade Runner.
Oh, no wonder why he's popular.
Yeah, but he also wrote A Scanner Darkly, and he wrote Minority Report.
Oh, okay.
And he wrote a bunch of other. He wrote, I think, the thing that Total Recall was based on.
Minority Report is where they arrest people, like a time cop kind of.
Yeah, before they commit the crime.
I heard that they were doing that. Oh, so I heard that the government in Canada they had something in place where they're actually able to predict crime before it happened, just like Minority Report.
Yeah.
But they weren't implementing it. They just had that capability.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's from like super advanced algorithms on AI, mass surveillance or whatnot, but it makes sense. I mean,
it's an interesting thing because if we talk about what the National Security Agency has in the United States, they have quantum computers that are probably at least 30 years ahead of the ones that we had at Intel where I worked.
Yeah.
And the ones that we had at Intel were powerful enough that they could break most mediocre cryptography. But like the NSA could probably break today. They just don't want people to know it, but they probably could spoof things to the blockchain of Bitcoin. Like they could do things that are outrageously difficult cryptography, and they also have artificial intelligence that is. I think that we achieved, from what I had heard when I was working at Intel, I think that we had achieved sentience and artificial intelligence a long time ago. Not let's say maybe 10, 12 years ago.
Wow.
So that's not that long ago, but
do you think that have you ever? I had this thought one time that AI, maybe it stood for something other than artificial intelligence. Maybe it stood for Aquarius intelligence.
Well, the thing is that in truth, all intelligence is artificial, or all intelligence
has a structure.
All intelligence is equally artificial, meaning that none of it's actually artificial. It is a growth. It's an outgrowth of the basic nature of awareness and consciousness interacting.
So, in other words, self-organizing.
It's self-organizing, yeah. And what happens is I learned this very well by studying I Ching, and I was studying the Chinese system of I Ching, which is a system of it's actually, if you want to put it into modern terms, is a system of binary mathematics. That's what Gottfried Leibniz used to create the binary mathematics that he put into use in the creation of modern computing. That was back in 1860 or something, you know.
And most likely it was probably rediscovered. I know we talked about
he read it from the I Ching.
Yeah,
it's 5,000, 6,000 years old at least, and the I Ching is just ones and zeros. It's just
on off.
It's just yin and yang.
Yeah.
And the yin is the 0 and the yang is the 1. So the 0 can accept anything, and the yang outpours.
Almost like a mug is a perfect representation of the yin, right? Because it's empty, and if it wasn't empty, you wouldn't be able to fill it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like the Zen master story, you know, like he said, well, before I can teach you, you got to empty your cup.
Yeah.
You know,
I did that myself. I went through a pretty big spiritual letting go of everything I could imagine. And it took 1 year of, I'm sure that may be a short time frame for some people, but for me, I wanted it more than ever.
Yeah.
And I let go, I unlearned, I didn't believe in anything anymore.
Yeah.
And I just trusted the universe and it delivered at some point.
I've gone through a similar thing myself. That it's so strange because there was a period in my life after I was in a terrible truck accident that many of my viewers may know about, but many may not. That I was just in a bad truck accident where I rolled off the side of a mountain and barely survived and miraculously survived.
Yeah, that's a miracle.
And after that,
when you got into the accident, when you started rolling down the hill, were you aware of it when it was happening? Or did you just let go and close your eyes and let it happen? I
did close my eyes. My last memory is of I saw that I was going off the cliff.
Yeah.
And I said, "It's time to die now. Close your eyes." And I closed my eyes and I was like, "It's time to die." And I fully accepted it, but it didn't come.
So you were relaxed. You weren't tense?
Yeah, I was relaxed. And then what happened was I didn't die. And then I had to wind back down from that state. That took years. Years. I mean, I'm still, in certain ways...
It's traumatic, right?
Yeah, it's basically, you get PTSD from that kind of thing.
Sure.
That kind of near-death experience, you go very close to the spirit world. Basically, you're at the threshold of it, and then you're like, oh, but, because the thing is, ideally, your spirit wants to leave the body before the body actually physically gets the fatal blow.
Where do you think it leaves from?
I think that it leaves from the lungs. I think that it's an out breath, and then it's just nothing. Mm-hmm. That's why Ruach, spirit, is breath. Mm-hmm. I think that you breathe out.
Maybe. I don't know. I was just wondering.
Yeah. I think that you breathe out and then that's it.
It makes me wonder if the heart isn't the home.
I feel like the heart is the center, definitely.
Because the only reason I say this, a story was shared with me that there's this couple and this man's wife was in a traumatic accident and died, and they had to do heart surgery, and they had a donor ready, and they replaced her heart and saved her life. Mm-hmm. And so after a few weeks of recovery, this woman, his wife, wasn't really the same, and he started to notice, and she went from being kind of like a motherly type figure and then turning into this politician like figure after a while. And so the man was so, I mean, he knew it wasn't the same person, and he looked into it a little bit further and found out that the donor, was into politics. I have no idea if this is true or not.
I heard a very, very similar story that I've recounted. I think I recounted it last night on my Secret Teachings of All Ages lecture, but that it was a story that George Norrie told on Coast to Coast AM, which was that a story of a man who had a heart transplant, and he hated mustard, and he hated like roller coasters and motorcycles and things like that. But the person who died in a motorcycle accident and was a motorcycle enthusiast and loved mustard. And so when the heart was transplanted, suddenly the guy was super into motorcycles.
I wonder if there's anything to that.
Yeah.
It could be.
I feel like there's three brains. There's three brains in the body.
Okay.
And there's the cranium.
I know one of
cranium brain. There's the genital brain, and there's the
one that likes to take
brain.
over sometimes.
Yeah. But the genital and gut brain, that brain is like the animal brain. Like when your life is threatened, that's the brain that's going to act to save your life.
That's almost auto response.
Yeah, auto responding.
Yeah.
It's deep. It's deep down. That's why we talk about deep feelings. We talk about deep things, gut instinct,
animal instinct.
Like, you know, and when we talk about
base chakra.
Yeah, the sacral chakra and the
monkey
exactly.
brain.
Yeah, the monkey brain is essentially the digestive brain. Because
it was funny because we were just talking about like gut biome and the microbial whatever's going on. Yeah. So like everything that we eat leaves like a trace in our gut, and I found it interesting that meat in particular, when we eat meat, it leaves a gut biome that actually has a little bit of control over the head. And I this is coming out of, you know, some report from some school. You'll have to look for it, but it was to the point where they tested it. They wanted to see how far it went, and they had a group of people sitting at a table, and this side was all meat eaters and this side was all like plant-based, and they took the meat eaters aside, and they actually found that even after presenting the meat eaters with, you know, this notion that, hey, this food, you know, takes over your mind, so if you go to plant-based you'll be healthier, they did the whole lecture, and then they still ended up choosing to eat meat. I don't know, they demonstrated it in a way in which they knew, oh, okay, but they still did it.
So
it might not just be with meat. I mean, it could be with everything. It's probably with everything.
My point of view on eating meat, we were discussing this earlier, that I was just cooking something that was a vegetable stir fry, but
really good.
Thank you. But I usually don't cook with meat, but I do sometimes eat meat, and the reason why is because after having studied with the Native Americans and studying their hunting rituals, the way that they would hunt, you know, when they would go out to hunt a deer or something like that, they would pray a lot to ask God to give them that deer as a sacrifice, and they would shoot the deer and they would chase it till it collapsed, because an arrow is enough to wound it, but it's got to bleed out for a while before it will collapse. So you chase it, and then they would lay down with the deer and they would look it in the eyes and they would thank it. Yeah. They would thank it for its sacrifice. And so I almost think that meat eating can be a natural part of the human life cycle and lifestyle if it's done correctly. But the thing is that factory farming is something that separates us from the dying of the animals, so that you and I, if we buy the hamburger at the store, we don't experience this. We didn't have to kill that animal. We didn't look it in the eyes. We didn't look at it. We didn't see it, and we didn't want to see it. And that's what's so wrong about our society, is that we've disconnected from death so much. We've done so much to distance ourselves from death and dying that we no longer have a natural cycle, really. And so eating a plant-based diet is a more sane way to do it when you're in this culture that has this. But if you were to return to a cycle where your meat was coming from a symbiotic relationship, and a relationship where then it doesn't, because the problem is that when you eat factory farm meat, the mind of the animal that affects your mind, that mind is filled with hate and pain and suffering and all of these negative emotions that we inflicted on that animal. But if it was a more natural death from hunting, for example, that animal has its mind, and if you spiritually did it properly and petitioned the animal to be your prey, asked it for permission to kill it.
The way kind of I view this whole idea, because I don't take sides on plant-based. I just am. Every meal is a choice. That's kind of how I look at it.
Right.
But I mainly go plant-based. And it wasn't always the case, but I feel like that time where we get our meat at the grocery store has served us. But I think that we're evolving in a way to where maybe we're not going to be so much meat eaters as we used to be.
It's not as necessary anymore.
Yeah, like our intelligence has kind of surpassed that whole notion. But I don't know. We'll see, right?
Well, so I mean, the eating of meat and the eating of especially fish.
Because we've kind of outfished the oceans. We've kind of like killed half the land. I mean, there's been a lot of destruction.
There's definitely this idea that
I feel like maybe it's time to give them a break.
Yeah,
just for a little while, you know.
Humans are almost like the Earth you could think of as like an apple, and humans are almost like the mold that grows on it. And
it can be,
but we
have the choice if we want to be that parasite or
we can choose to be symbiotic instead of parasitic.
There's 3 types of relationships in the animal kingdom, right? There's one that, you know, the fish lives in the coral and the coral doesn't change. There's another where fish eats fish and, you know, basically feeds off that one. And the third one is symbiotic, where both parties kind of work together to survive.
Yeah.
And I think that for a while now, like that's that era that we've been in, that we've kind of been stuck in, is kind of like, it served us for a time being, but I think we can do better, like as a human race. Yeah. And I think we can start shifting that kind of concept.
I think that we can. And I think that we should, because we have all the resources. Actually, I feel like we have all the resources to feed every human being on this planet right now. And the fact that there's anyone starving at all is one of the greatest travesties.
That blows my mind, because every time like I get a pepper, I see millions of seeds on the inside. Well, 50 seeds on the inside. And I always just throw them out there because I feel like the fruit was given to me in order for me to plant its seed, and the tree still, or whatever, it still grows after I pick it and I plant it. Right. But I feel like that's the karmatic way, because everything works in flow and harmony. And that I'm not like taking and then destroying. I'm actually like trying to, hey, there's your children, go.
I feel like even if we properly did a hydroponic-based farming, like
have you heard of aeroponics?
Yeah.
Aeroponics blew my mind. They stack up to the ceiling and they just drip the water with like the, I don't know what they put in it. Who knows?
Yeah, but what was amazing to me, I wrote up a plan and I posted it on my Discord. It was maybe like a year ago or 6 months ago, but it was basically I posited if I was Jeff Bezos of Amazon and I had $150 billion. Here's what I would do with it. And I figured out that I could solve world hunger like within a year with $20 billion. With only $20 billion. Well, that's a lot of money, but it's like $20 billion is not that much money, because when you look at the amount of money that is in offshore banks in the Caribbean is $32 trillion. $32 trillion. So $20 billion is just pennies compared to that. The amount of money that they're talking about in some of these banks is off the charts. There's $600 trillion in gold derivatives in the market. $600 trillion in gold derivatives.
A derivative is not the physical, but it's a like ticket almost.
Yeah.
Imaginary.
It's an imaginary. Yeah, right. Okay. Exactly. But that's also part of the problem, is that So the United States sent a bunch of gold to, was it Iran or was it China? But they sent gold to someone, and then when they drilled into it, they found that it was just gold-plated tungsten.
Ooh, gotcha.
Got him.
I hate to be that debt collector.
Oh yeah, man.
Well,
that's like if you watched Babylon Berlin.
I'm not gonna lie, I've done shady stuff like that myself. When I was young, I was 14 years old, and I decided to go on eBay and sell double-headed coins. I thought, hey, I can make quick bucks, so I put it on eBay. It was a gross, so 144 double-sided coins, an assortment of like dimes, nickels, pennies, and quarters. Mm-hmm. Sure enough, somebody bought it, and they paid way too much for it. And what I did is I took the coin, I had a coin jar, and I super glued them. It was like a magic shop that bought these, so they thought they were going to get like double-sided coins. And I super glued them and back to back so they were heads. And I shipped them. The guy emailed, what is this? This is BS. I can't believe you did this. I felt like, I'm not going to lie, I felt like shit, but the description was accurate. The pictures were accurate. It was deceiving, but I was 14, so.
Yeah, I mean, I know what you mean. Is that everyone goes through kind of a period where they're like, what shit can I get away with?
Yeah.
And then
right up until I was 17, I did
stuff. Like your guilt.
Well, what
for
did it
some
for me,
people,
it was karma. That's how I learned, karma.
There you go.
Literally, because some things I had done came back almost. It was like instant karma. It happened so quick, and I was so young when I learned that, and I just had an understanding for it right away. And throughout the rest of my life, that course corrected when I realized that. That course corrected how I acted.
Yeah.
Just by me learning it and experiencing it. Had I not experienced it, I would have never known.
Yeah. It's crazy how that I mean, we're just we're ever growing beings, Yeah. We have an eternal pathway. Joseph Smith of Mormon prophet fame, he termed it eternal progression.
Yeah.
That there's an eternal progression of intelligence where as long as we try to improve all the time,
right.
Even if we fail a lot, we can still make an upward trajectory over time.
I feel like failures are my biggest learning moments.
They are.
In life. Yeah. If I make them, if I miss the opportunity, then they might happen again.
Even if you look at the stock market, over the past, it goes up, crash, goes up further, crash, goes up way further, crash. I mean, it has a system of boom and bust. Or has a cycle of boom and bust, or a cycle of bubbles. That people like to talk about bubbles, but it's almost, I just think of it like everything in the universe in terms of we were talking about the Hermetic principles, like the Kybalion and the Hermetic principles of polarity and rhythm and vibration. It's always like a sine wave kind of moving through a positive space and a negative space. So it's like you go through a boom.
Isn't that the word?
Go through a bust,
Sound. Frequency, vibration, like Nikola Tesla, 369.
That's so in the beginning, and that's the beginning of the book of John.
Isn't word audio, like voice frequency?
Right. In the beginning was logos.
Yes.
And logos means much. It means word, but
for a motion graphic designer, it's logos.
Yeah, logos. In the beginning, there were logos.
Yeah.
But I looked at the Arby's logo and I was like,
well, that's why there's so much hidden meaning in logos.
There really is.
I mean, it's baffling. It's not.
It's
so
crazy
much about,
what they hide in them.
Oh yeah, it's about the background, people, not about the foreground.
Yeah.
You really want to find like the good stuff. It's the background. Yeah. It's the void, the in between.
I really like the symbolism that they hide in there. There's a lot of symbolism that they hide, and there's a lot of this is the question that I have personally. to what degree do humans do this consciously versus unconsciously? Because I think that our collective subconscious deals in symbols all the time and understands them on a deeper level than we consciously do. But some people seem to, like marketing people and advertising people, and they seem to have an understanding of symbols and symbolism, and people who are Freemasons, they employ those symbols to do work,
to communicate,
to do work for them.
Sure.
And that's what a graphic designer is.
Interesting, because that, now that you mention that, there's got to be this fundamental geometry type work in these logos that almost like casting a spell or creating abundance, etc. Right? There's got to be more to just a symbol being a certain way. It represents something. So I've kind of like come to this notion that in my world, I keep everything perfectly neat. Like I have everything tidy, clean, to the best of my ability.
Yeah. And
when that happens, everything is just perfectly in harmony in my environment. But I notice that the second everything is disorderly, chaos comes in, as if these beings just, like I imagine like a little gnome coming in and putting my car keys in the trash can. Because the house is a mess, right? Yeah. So I've noticed that. So I think having a structure or a good kind of like, I feel like almost that ties into quantum theory and Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. Yeah. Is that the more shit that you're unaware of, the more random it can be. Sure.
Because this is something I've noticed in life, is that like when I was driving trucks, I was always cognizant of where highway patrol could be at any given time.
Yeah.
Because we actually had to speed in order to make our times. And it was like a requirement. We had to really break Department of Transportation rules in order to do what we were hired to do. And that sucks, and it's wrong, and it shouldn't be that way at all. But there's this little game that they play about it. But the thing is that you're not ever going to get pulled over until the time that you're not thinking about, that you're not cognizant of the fact that you could get pulled over at any moment.
As if something was waiting for you to stop paying attention.
Yeah, as if something was waiting for you to stop paying attention.
There you go.
Yeah.
Get pulled over. I've seen that myself. Yeah. Absolutely. It brings me into the moment, like of being absolutely here. And there are times where I'm not always in the moment, acting in the now, present moment. And as of lately, I've been practicing that. And when I first started doing it, I was almost like putting a strain on my head. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, pay attention. And then you're like, and you're like straining. So I started to kind of practice like being absolutely in the moment. And for the past, since I started doing it, it's definitely helped me become more aware of everything around me, not just what's in front of me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like the more that you can realize that the only time that you ever really live is now.
Yeah.
The past doesn't really exist, and the future doesn't really exist. There's really just now.
Yeah.
And even when you're trying to comprehend what was the thing I was just saying like 5 seconds ago. I mean, if you can posit an omnipotent God, then that omnipotent God could snap his fingers at any given time and implant the memories in you of your whole lifetime up to now.
Sure.
The entire universe, he could say, this is the history of the universe up until this moment, and this is the moment, and now we're growing. It's like being a director in a movie. Like, he can arrange things to his liking, and then say, action. That's the power of God versus the power of man, where man is the observer that's forced. Well, not necessarily forced, but gets to experience life in a
vessel,
or a linear manner, in a manner that make sense of it. Because if you could see it from God's perspective, it almost would make less sense than it does now. Because it's like, it would just be, well, I bet there are meta patterns. There are meta patterns in it that, like, who knows? Like, people's lifetimes could make, like, pictures of people's faces in ASCII or something. You know, something ridiculous, like what you would see on the internet. God could be memeing himself on his own image boards of his own mind.
When I was kind of looking into philosophy and learning from it, I had my own epiphanies throughout it. And one of the notions was this idea that the absolute of everything, whatever it is, the whole universe, okay, or like quantum, for instance, if this was everything and everything has already been created and everything has already been done, then are we like really creating anything? And it was kind of a sad moment for me because is anything new? Is anything really new?
Well, you could think about then. Well, non novum sub sole is the word from the Vulgate, the Latin Bible. It says nothing new under the sun.
Yeah.
But the thing is that infinity exists in a sense, and your mind almost. And this is where Plato was saying all knowledge exists already. It's just a matter of recalling it.
Yeah. Discover.
Of recalling it.
Yeah.
It's not the first time it's been called. It's recalling.
Yeah.
It's, but when you discover something, you're not discovering it necessarily for the first time. You can discover things all over again. You can forget about them and discover them again. And
sure.
So
I find myself doing that a lot.
It's like there's an infinite memory of an infinite number of possible memories, and we choose to recall them in various patterns or intervals.
Like, did we invent it, or was it already there? We just brought it back into light.
And that's where we get into, like, this is what when I'm talking about the shape of the universe, I don't think that when people are like, oh, the world is a sphere, the world is flat, I'm like, well, I don't think it's either flat or a sphere.
Yeah.
It's the world is a projection of this computer that takes in this sense data in interaction with this system that has a volitional ruler that is this spirit, that is this, like, there's a complex of things.
But there are rules.
There are
These
rules.
rules, if you don't abide by, you'll get bit in the butt. Well, there's a consequence, right? And that's karma.
Yeah.
For every action I make, there's a repercussion.
If you walk off a cliff, then you will fall.
Unless you figured out something I haven't figured out.
Well, Wile E. Coyote did.
Well, that's this whole idea of belief, right? When we believe we can do something, like the Wright brothers, they flew because they believed that they could do it. And then other people believe that something can't be true, and that almost makes it impossible for them. So it like frames in their mindset a frame of mind with a belief. Sometimes
I think about that, like, in terms of Jesus walking on water, or I think that, like, maybe I could walk on water.
Go to Antarctica. They have ice sheets for days you can walk on.
Well, there's that. Yeah. Well, that would be an interesting thing. We could talk about,
go walk on some ice.
Nazis. I want to go to Antarctica. I want to see if there's a hole at the South Pole.
I've heard the hollow earth theory.
Yeah.
I've heard of that, where Admiral Richard E. Byrd.
Yeah.
He did a couple
Byrd,
missions down there.
Operation High Jump.
Yeah. And then there was another one, Operation Fishbowl.
Yeah.
And another one was, I don't know, they were like detonating nukes up in the sky.
Yeah.
It was crazy. But yeah, he left behind, his son published it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was his writings when he was stuck down there.
Yeah.
And it contained some interesting stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can recall any of that.
Well, I just remember that it was. I remember at the time feeling confused and wondering about the veracity of the material, because I know a lot about Admiral Byrd and the Operation High Jump, and I read his journals, the supposed journals, but I was just like, are these the real journals? Because if these are the real journals, that means that everything that we know about things is...
Well, I had this realization that what if this story of there being an opening at the North or South Pole,
North and South Pole,
that connected to the North Pole,
mm-hmm.
and
a torus, or
then it kind of reminded me of, wait a minute, how do I look, like, step back from this and
mm-hmm.
find a different perspective, like shift my awareness,
right?
And I thought of Plato in a cave, and then I'm thinking, what if this whole idea, this notion around an opening in the hollow earth wasn't just another iteration of the same old story that came from the cave, that came from...
I've also thought about, what if you walked to that point of the hollow of the earth, and you walked in, and you didn't actually walk onto the inside of a sphere. You just walked onto the outside of a different sphere.
Sure, yeah.
And you walked basically through a dimensional door.
Yeah. Or
of some kind.
That makes sense,
actually. And I feel like that's actually more what I think is going on.
Almost like...
There's like parallel.
Like an infinite loop, right?
Right, yeah, like a Mobius strip.
Yeah.
It's like a Mobius strip.
Or even, what is it? The apple-shaped toroidal field kind of idea.
Or like a Klein bottle.
Yes. Yes. Or an hourglass.
Yeah.
Maybe. Who knows? That's why I say, like, until I'm up there, until I have the perspective from, let's say, the moon.
Right.
As far as I could possibly go before leaving or something, right? Let's say
What do you think about the moon landing?
What do I think about the moon landing?
Do you believe that it happened?
Well, I don't believe in anything.
There you go.
I just... I have...
That's a safe way to be, I guess.
I have ideas that have brought me truth.
Mm.
But as far as the moon landing goes, I think there is a lot more to that whole idea than we've been led to believe. Mm-hmm. Like my grandmother, she's diehard. Oh, I was there when they did it.
Right.
And she saw it on TV, and it was a big deal. Whether or not they went to the moon with a physical...
You saw 9/11 on TV, right?
Correct.
I saw 9/11 on TV. And so, like... If someone was like, 9/11 was just a hologram, man, it was all just fake, it was all just... What would we think? We'd be like, well, I saw it on TV. But then at the same time, I saw it on TV, so you don't know that that's real.
Exactly.
Anything that you see on TV could be fake.
Same with the...
I wasn't in New York.
Mm-hmm.
But there were people who were.
Yeah.
Seth MacFarlane always tells his story about being in New York, and he was going to be on that plane.
Well, it's possible... Anything's possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
The whole moon landing conspiracy. Usually, there's always a half truth with any story. So I would advise anybody who's interested in it to look into it more, because even if it is true or if it isn't true, at least you're practicing like this abstract thinking. You're challenging the narrative, and anytime we challenge the narrative, that leads us to a higher level of thinking. And that's why I think conspiracies are very important for the growth of consciousness in most people. Yeah. Because it challenges us to think outside of the box.
I actually agree wholeheartedly with that. And that's a big reason why I do what I'm doing here, is because I believe in free thinking. That free thought is the driving force behind freedom of the individual.
Liberation.
Like, all liberty comes from, first, freedom in thinking. And if you can think freely, but you can't speak freely, then you're still not able to obtain much. But if you can think freely and speak freely, then eventually you'll be able to act freely.
Yeah.
And then if you can think freely and speak freely and act freely, then at that point, you should be able to be free.
Well, I hope. Unless there's something else that we don't know about.
Well, yeah, something beyond action and something beyond.
Yeah,
that which very well could be. And there's, in my opinion, there's probably an infinite number of dimensions. There's probably not a finite number. Like some people are like, there's 7 dimensions, there's 11 dimensions. I think that maybe there's an infinite number of dimensions, but they just don't all overlap.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can have a cluster of dimensions that's this, and a cluster of dimensions that's that.
Yeah.
And they can be on separate axes from each other. That they don't really have to make sense given each other's frames of reference. That's the real issue that we come to, is that subjectivity is only really a frame of reference. So it's subjectivity is the objective, but boxed into a frame.
Mm-hmm.
And that frame is the frame that we allow our mind to
create this reality, essentially.
Yeah. So we decide. We decide instead of looking at the whole world, and looking, for example, we could say like if we look at the whole world, there might be a lot of suffering, there might be a lot of warfare, there might be a lot of things going on, but then we decide, let's look at small town Wyoming where everything's perfect and everything's okay, and like we decide to shut ourselves down into this little block.
Mm-hmm.
And we're gonna just tune out all the noise.
I find when I get too hypercritical on notions or ideas of how things are going to be, that's usually the most destructive for me.
Mm-hmm.
Going into something thinking it's going to be a certain way, and they turn out to be completely not that. So I don't know, when we focus our attention on how societies are and everything, we're focusing our attention away from us, like who we are and what we have to offer, and how, like, I don't know. I know that, like, for instance, I've experienced people who are scared of going to Mexico.
Yeah.
Because they think it's criminals and you're going to get kidnapped, and because that's all they see on TV.
It's funny because I've even been to Mazatlan, which is
love Mexico, by the way.
Yeah, I love Mexico too.
It's amazing, and it was so much fun, and everybody there was and yeah, sure, you have crime everywhere. You go to Brooklyn, you go to Manhattan, you go anywhere, and you're gonna have. It's all about what is brought to like most people, and I think there's been a lot of like programming.
There is
to believe things a certain way.
That's because there are certain groups of people who are trying to herd humanity in certain directions. They've decided that they have a vision for the future, mm-hmm. and that they want to achieve it, so that they're going to get from point A to point B by any means necessary, and they're going to shepherd the people.
Mm-hmm.
And so they do their best to keep the people asleep with various kinds of opiates, various kinds of dopamine triggers.
Oh, are you talking about the whole what was that just came out? Adrenochrome?
Oh, we were talking about adrenochrome, yeah. Well,
where did that even come from?
Adrenochrome.
It's on the government website,
Well, adrenochrome is a first of all, it's a real substance.
Yeah.
But whether it's psychoactive to the level that people are talking about it, that amount is not known, except that Hunter S. Thompson wrote about it in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Mm.
And it was part of his story there. And so some people believe that he exaggerated it, and that it's not really a psychoactive thing because it's basically oxygen. I think it's oxygenated adrenaline, something like that.
If the story is true, how they're getting it, that needs to stop.
Oh yeah, well,
that's the worst thing
story.
I've ever heard.
The story is that they are extracting it from living human beings' adrenal glands as they're living. I mean,
that's a crime against humanity.
That is definitely...
If it's true. I mean, I don't know. I don't have any...
It's certainly a crime against humanity. And I think that, well, there's...
My heart goes out to anybody who's suffering, too.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know whether the adrenochrome thing is true or whether it's a psychological operation.
That's the whole concept that I've kind of like led myself into. Like I'm not really sure about anything anymore because it's so easy to manipulate everything.
Right.
That even the content that we receive on our smartphone or on our computer, it's all handed to us from whatever box is running the show.
That's true.
And it can easily, with micro changes, it could shift a person's the way in which they think. There's actually like programs out there over in I don't know what I'm speaking about, so that's why I'm having trouble. But there are ways in which you can shift somebody's opinion with these types of psychological manipulation.
So there was a study that the CIA did. This was public. This was a public study.
Yeah.
And they did it so that they could get funding from Congress for about I feel like it was about $170 million to fund this project to make sock puppet social media accounts. Mm-hmm. Basically, the study was if there was if people were exposed to a political dialogue where they didn't really have a horse in the race, they didn't really have any opinion on it already, then they would choose to side with whatever appeared to them to be the most popular side 75% of the time.
And this is through like algorithms, like deep learning.
Yeah, deep learning algorithms. They learn this.
I'm aware. So why don't we use this for good? You know what I mean?
Well, the thing is,
I define good as if somebody knows what good is.
Some people believe that that's what they're doing.
But
the thing is that we disagree about what good even is.
Right. That's what I mean. Like, how can we even like come to a conclusion on what good is?
So we have the people who are running Twitter, the people who are running Google, the people who are running these big tech companies who have access to that technology, and they decide we want to steer humanity this direction.
Sure.
They can do whatever they want to manipulate the search results, or even to skew them so slightly that it wouldn't be noticeable except over a long period of time. And that's exactly what we've seen, is that they've skewed them toward kind of I don't even have a problem with their ideology, really. It's just that they skew them toward a kind of a socialist ideology, kind of progressive kind of vision of society, of being post-gender, post-race, post-everything. But somehow that has also all backfired on them, because they tried to manipulate everyone, and people... Because I think this is what it is. I think that animals have a very developed sense of being prey. They have a very developed sense of when they're being hunted. And when someone is trying to herd you or manipulate you in some way that, like when wolves or when African wild dogs will go and they will attack a herd of gazelles or something, they will herd it. They will attack it from all these angles to try to force it into an area where they will be cornered. So as naturally, they develop a kind of defense mechanism. And so I feel like deep down, this is why people's reaction to it is so violent or so angry. Like you can see such an angry reaction to what these people have been doing, because they've been trying to actively manipulate society, and society feels that something is wrong, feels that they're being herded into something, feels that they're being manipulated somehow, feels that they're being kind of shoveled off toward the slaughterhouse, And when the cows start feeling like they're being shuffled toward the slaughterhouse, there can be some unrest among the cattle.
Oh yeah.
So a lot of time, that's why they start putting blinders on the cows, and they keep them from.
The same thing goes with chickens.
Yeah.
As well.
Chickens
they know they feel empathy,
pigs.
Emotions, compassion. Every animal has different strength, almost as if when the creation happened, everything kind of counterbalanced it. So you create this and you have to have that. You create this, you have to have that. And as the animal kingdom grew, we had all these different concepts. And that's why you have spiders that look amazing under a microscope, but might be scary to somebody. But everything, it was built with such perfection, so much care, so much design. If you look at a grasshopper, I mean, it's just beautiful how much detail is in everything. A butterfly wing, there's nanoparticulates in the butterfly wing all the way up.
It's so,
I can't even imagine.
My sister sent me something the other day that I think it was sparrows. But sparrows, basically, when they open their mouths, they have a kind of, you know how you have the QR codes, which are the binary code blocks. Basically, it's just black and white things. Birds have the inside of their mouths patterned in a certain way so that the parents, when they look at the birds' mouths, they can identify their own babies and identify ones that are, for example, the cuckoo bird is a parasitic nester. So they
steal nests?
No, they hatch. They lay their egg in someone else's nest.
Okay.
So that their child,
their
child will be parasitically raised among them. Yeah. And
that happens a lot in the animal kingdom.
It happens even in the human race.
I love watching, Discovery Channel or Animal Planet and all those episodes where they actually go and follow one animal for a while, and we learn so much from animals when we just pay enough attention to their movement, to their actions. A lot.
That's why, the Chinese martial arts, the Shaolin styles are based on observation of animals. So they have crane style kung fu, tiger style kung fu, monkey style kung fu, snake style.
Bunny rabbit can turn on a dime.
Yeah.
Where the wolf will just keep going.
Yeah,
but the wolf teams up in a pack and eventually it can get that rabbit. And so they work together. And every animal has a little bit heightened skill from its enemy, or I guess predator.
Yeah, and it's a constant arms race almost. Evolution. That's how Charles Darwin would kind of put the.
So that makes me wonder: are we really, if we're so high in the food chain, why are we eating everything under? No, are we really the highest in the food chain?
I think that actually we're not. I think that there are creatures above us that eat us. I think that they do. They have
to. If I were to lean towards one side, I would lean towards that idea.
I think that that we are harvested and we are.
It's possible.
We are farmed on this earth in a certain sense. For example, think about it this way: if you were a very spiritually refined being, you might not have a need for physical sustenance anymore, but you might have a need for emotional sustenance or energetic sustenance. And the sustenance that you would receive then would be from almost like when humans watch Netflix, they're receiving a kind of entertainment sustenance from that. And when the human race has wars and when the human race has all these dramas and things, there are these beings that feed on the human emotions that are involved, in the sense that they're like viewers on the Netflix things. They're viewing our lives as if they're individual Netflix shows or something like that.
So we're almost giving our energy away, our life force.
Yes, our life force is drained by these energetic beings that in Islam they're called jinn, or
it's almost like the Roman Christos kind of idea, or
the Roman idea would be the
anointing oil.
The Roman idea is the idea of the daemon.
Okay.
Or the demon.
Demon, internet, yeah.
Yeah.
Interdimensional being.
Yeah,
alien kind of thing.
Yeah, essentially they're...
Which, from my perspective and experience, they are real.
Yeah.
They're not like us, though. They're like two-dimensional light bodies. I've experienced them.
Yeah, it's very, very different. It's very, very different than anything that you can.
But they're
really
either,
describe.
From what I've witnessed, they're either positive or negative. They are there. I've seen them.
Yeah.
I don't know. You guys might think I might have been hallucinating, but maybe I was. Who knows?
Well, let's say that there's definitely some times when you're taking mushrooms or something like that when you're going to see some entities that are like, fractal in nature or
like
strange.
Machine elves, as Terrence McKenna would say.
Yeah,
wasn't. I didn't have a psychedelic experience when I had this. I was breath work and meditation and fasting.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So.
Well, fasting is a very powerful practice.
It is, and it can induce DMT from the pineal.
I think that's one of the purposes of it.
Yeah. Or going in the dark for 5 days straight.
Tibetan Buddhist cave meditation.
I want to try that.
Yeah,
to do it.
I've even heard of people locking themselves in their own bathroom.
I couldn't do that. It stinks in there.
Well,
I'll take the cave.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, a cave might start to stink after you've been in there for 5 days using it as a bathroom.
I'll go to a drug cartel's dungeon and borrow that for a few days.
What? Okay, if you want to.
I'm sure he won't mind.
Yeah, they'll probably say, okay, go ahead. You got the money?
Yeah, right? Nope. Yeah. Is it cool? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's like, well, if you got the money, I got the time. Well,
speaking of time, what time is it?
It is now 18:42. Wow. Well, we have been talking for a good amount of time, and I think we probably could wrap it up here if you would like to.
Sure, it's up to you. You call it.
Yeah, I think we've had a great conversation. I think I would like to have you back on for...
I'd love to, yeah. I'd like to do this again when I'm more well rested.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this was a great conversation. Thank you all for joining us. I know that this was kind of on short notice. I like to give more notice on these things, but this one we just kind of impromptu did today.
Yeah.
And just trying to...
We were planning it for a while, though.
Yeah, we've been planning on doing this.
And then you wandered up to, where was it? Portland?
Yeah, I was in Portland, and then
it's beautiful up there, though, isn't it?
It is, but Portland is kind of a weird place and kind of messed up in a lot of ways.
Is it the psilocybin capital of the world or something?
Yeah, I think so. They're about to legalize it.
Oh, thank you.
They're about to legalize it, and I'm happy for that.
I feel like psilocin isn't the answer, but it's the start.
But yeah, it's not the answer, but it's a nice. I mean, it's a great medicine for a lot of things. Yeah, and that's what more can you ask for? We need to better understand our plant medicines. Rather than using these pharmaceutical medicines that Bayer or Pfizer are making. Bayer owns Monsanto. So who you think they're really looking out for your health when they're making you your aspirin or your Vicodin or,
Well, the way I look at it is when humanity is ready, I think all these things will be available. Like, health, longevity,
in a certain sense, they're taboo for a reason.
Cars that drive on water, whatever.
Yeah.
So, but I don't think our mindset is quite ready, or even like, have we proved ourselves? Like, are we getting along? Are we acting as brother and sister? Are we doing all that we do out of love, or are we still getting angry? And not saying like the foo-foo love kind of thing, but I am saying like the way in which we interact, our daily behaviors, there must be a goal of all this of some sort. I guess I'm going to talk. So the whole concept would be maybe not so much focus on the government or on society, but on ourselves. And if we create like that change in ourselves, then maybe it'll reflect with other people at some point too. And then we can finally get to that like free energy and everything that's already been there, but it'll be like a reward almost.
I like to always end with a prayer of a certain kind. And in this case, I'm going to just say, let us pray that all of this that's going on with the coronavirus and everything is going to bring about the kinds of changes that you were just talking about. And let's make a toast to that. And that will be our prayer for today. Cheers, my friend.
Cheers, buddy.
And thank you for joining us. And we're going to be making more of these. We're getting higher and higher quality as we go along. As you may have noticed, hopefully this has been great quality for all of you.
Yeah, thank you, K-Neb.
Yes, our good friend K Nebula, my roommate, she's an amazing human being, and she'll be joining me soon, I'm sure. She has lots of interesting things to say.
I'm pretty sure she's the Oracle.
Yeah,
but doesn't know it yet. She's like a young Oracle.
Yeah, she's like the Oracle at Delphi.
One day she'll figure it out, and she'll be like, "Whoa, I didn't know I had all this power."
Yeah, that's cool, man. But thank you all for joining us, and I will see you for later this week for more episodes and more Secrets Teachings of All Ages lectures. And you can check out Gregory Baldi at do you have a website, or do you have?
Yeah, I mean, if you're interested in any services, my website is gregorybaldi.com.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, obviously he's a great guy, so support all the great people that you can find in life is my motto. Like, the more that you can support people in your community, and the more that you can find kindred spirits that are like worth supporting, the stronger we all get. And that's the message that I want to leave us on tonight.